Hello, everybody, and welcome to Planet FPL, the world where everything revolves around Fantasy Premier League. My name's Serge.
And my name is James.
And it's Correspondent Week. It rolls on. We have 20 podcasts this week, one for every Premier League club with our correspondents. And today we have, James, with us, an OG, as we enter season 4, been a correspondent since the beginning.
I don't even know what OG means.
Original gangster.
Yeah.
OGs are people.
Have you seen this guy's jumper?
OGs are people they're from the beginning. Introduce our correspondent today, James.
This man is a rarity because I actually like him in spite of the team he supports, and he actually took some sense. It doesn't happen often that you get this from one of them, but he's a proper decent lad. This is Adam Pritchard at 352, our Arsenal correspondent. Boo! How are you, mate?
I'm not too bad, thanks, James. I guess when you compare me to the AFTV mob, it's not exactly a high bar to clear.
This is what we all do in our minds, mate. We just think that you're just like one of them guys. So we don't really understand it when you start dropping knowledge bombs and stuff like that, mate. We should probably just clarify in the first instance, Adam's actually away on holiday during Correspondent Week. So we have had to record this prior to Community Shield, just in case, Aubameyang suddenly gets an injury. This podcast becomes a complete waste. But you said to me offline, Adam, you don't think there's much details from that's kind of going to change your perception of what you think on Arsenal at the moment?
No, not really. I think it's the only thing that will really be gained from it is whether Leno is fit enough for a starting position. And I see, in fact, as we're recording now, Arsenal are playing or are going to play today a friendly against MK Dons, and Leno is in the squad. So I suspect that means he's fit to start, and in that case, Martinez at 4-5, that dies to death, that dream. But no, I think the Community Shield is our first proper friendly. The squad have been back for a couple of days in like actual training, and even then, you know how this is, it'll only be light stuff when they first come back. So I don't really know if we're going to be able to gather a lot. I mean, formation possibly. But then again, I think even if we play 5 at the back, the sort of widely held consensus amongst Arsenal fans is that we'll switch to a 4-3-3, 4-2-3-1 for this season. So even then, I wouldn't know how much we'll be able to read into it, to be honest.
We've got to feel for Martinez. I was saying if he does lose his place, I mean, he's been with you for so long, done his loan spells, served his time, came in when Leno got injured, and actually, to all intents and purposes, played well. Like, you can't help, when you saw him at the end of the FA Cup final and the emotion, you can't help but think, great. And he did enough, almost you'd say, to keep his place. And there was some talk that, you know what, maybe he will keep his place, and that 4.5, he still then becomes an FPL asset. But you're of the opinion, if Leno's fit, Martinez back to the bench.
I don't know if he's back to the bench definitely, but I would say the goalkeeper spot is not really one I personally want to have to worry about him potentially being benched for. So I think there's other 4 or 5 options out there. I know that McCarthy and Nyland is being sort of touted as a rotation to start the season at least. And Leno is, I mean, in the grand scheme of footballers, he's not paid excessive amounts, but for goalkeepers, he's relatively well paid. And he was, like, aside from Aubameyang, our player of the season until he got injured, I think. It's easy to forget, just because Martinez has done so well, that Leno was an outstanding goalkeeper prior to his injury, and really, really improved as well. So yeah, all that to say, yeah, I think it would be harsh on Martinez, but it wouldn't necessarily surprise me, if that makes sense, because Leno is, to all intents and purposes, the number 1 goalkeeper.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, do you think he's a good option at 5 million? He's probably the best price. That price, is he? Or would you prefer someone like Ramsdale if you were going there, for example?
I mean, we do concede quite a lot of shots. So, yeah, there is that. To be honest, I haven't really thought about Arsenal goalkeepers, to be honest. I think, yeah, Ramsdale probably would be a better option. And if you're shopping at 5 mil in the Arsenal defence, I would even say Bellerin is probably probably a better option there than Leno.
It's been linked with a move. Is there anything in that?
I mean, it looks like we're trying to sell all our right backs at the moment.
What's that all about?
Well, we've got to generate money somehow, I guess.
You've got about 8 centre halves, haven't you?
About 16, it feels like. Yeah, there's talk that obviously PSG are playing. I think they played Kehrer, the German guy who's more traditionally I know him as a centre back in the Champions League final. And yeah, there's talk they want another right back, and Arsenal basically, it seems like, trying to raise money any which way possible. And he's 25 now. He's not a kid anymore. He's had injury problems. He had certainly had a bit of an up and down season. Came on well towards the end of it, but if you can get sort of 25, 30 million maybe for a kid who you got for nothing from Barcelona's youth academy, it's not the worst thing in the world. But yeah, it would be a little bit worrying to see him go.
Would weaken you though, wouldn't it? I mean, we at the time of recording, we think Maitland-Niles is leaving as well. Suddenly, what are you looking at Cedric at right back, or?
Oh, we'd have to sign again, which would make it a little bit bizarre. But I mean, if you can get a sort of a Max Aaron for less, does he come out net positive? Maybe.
If you come out of the pre-season with Aaron's in instead of Bellerin, you've got an extra 8 million in the bank or something. That doesn't feel right to me, mate. I mean, Bellerin's been terribly unlucky with injuries, hasn't he?
Yeah, but this is, if you think that, I mean, I agree with you. I prefer Bellerin stay. I prefer Maitland-Niles stay, to be honest. But if this is a way of generating funds, and Arteta sees, say, a central midfielder is absolutely vital to his project going forward, maybe he can.
You're getting linked with spending some money. Is that what, when you say you're trying to raise the funds? Obviously, it's been kind of well documented with the people that lost their jobs and stuff like that. But is it a need to raise funds, to reinvest funds, because Arteta wants to replace players perhaps in the midfield area, or get a different centre half, for example? Is that what this is about, essentially?
Yeah, no, essentially, because and don't forget, we sort of put off paying for Saliba. I think we were instalments over 2 years, and the same with Pepe. So that's probably combined about 30 million for those two guys who we'd effectively already signed. And then there's talk of the Gabriel, I can't pronounce his surname.
Megales, is it?
Megales, something like that.
Yeah.
He'll be sort of at least 20 million, probably rising up. And then, like you say, Thomas Partey, the really exciting one being Aouar from Lyon. That's another easy sort of.
I won't compare him to the player that I saw you subtly compare him to on our Slack channel, mate.
I won't either.
That'll get you in some trouble. If someone wants to ask me who that player is, DM and we'll have a laugh about it.
Yeah, it's I would be incredibly, almost too excited if we signed him. So I'm not even going to really think about it. But yeah, that's it really. The midfield needs an overhaul, and the centre back area needs an overhaul. So it's going to be a case of who can we sell, except maybe 5 players, I'd say.
Yeah, I see the thinking, because people like Socrates and Mustafi are not going to raise you big funds, etc. I think it's fairly obvious the manager probably wants to move them on that. What do you think defensively in terms of, you've already mentioned, and the Arsenal opinion seems to be back 4. I think it's an opinion me and Suj share as well, that we think you will eventually, even if it's not at the start, will transition back to a back 4. With what you've got now, what would be the first choice centre halves tomorrow? If we assume at this stage Gabriel hasn't signed.
Hasn't signed, yeah.
Oh, you think it's a done deal, do you? Or
yeah.
All right, let's say he has signed then.
So as things stand, it would be right back Bellerin, right centre back I think would be David Luiz, and I think weirdly Gabriel would be more likely to start than Saliba, consistently, sort of long term, and then Tierney at left back, because Gabriel's left-footed, by the way, if anyone doesn't know. So he's been bought to play left centre back.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. Because David Luiz he's I was going to say comfortable. It's the wrong fucking word, isn't it? But he's commonly played as a left-sided centre half. What's the story in central midfield at the moment? Because as we said, we think Maitland-Niles is going to leave. Dani Ceballos has obviously gone back to Real Madrid, but there's rumours that loan could be extended for another year. What's the current status in there? Or is that why you're being linked with people like Partey, for example?
Well, Partey and Ceballos are kind of different kind of players. Partey's more of a ball recovery, defensive midfielder in air quotes, even though he's not sort of the tough tackler you would traditionally expect from that role. But he's more robust than Ceballos, I'd say for sure. We put in a offer apparently to get Ceballos back on loan, except for like half his wages and less of a loan fee that we paid last year. And Madrid laughed that away.
Is Daniel Levy doing your negotiations?
Yeah, it might be. So that one, I think Arteta definitely wants him back. But then there's also rumours that Betis are interested and that AC Milan are interested in him as well. Sorry. So yeah, that's why we've been linked with other players in that position, really.
We like Ceballos. I think he's a good player. I think we never saw the best of him because of off-field stuff last season. But I think like in the cup final and that, he showed what a good player he is. And I really liked the way him and Xhaka actually played in that system. I thought they really suited each other really well. I actually think quite quietly it's a bit of a blow if you don't get him back. And obviously, definitely if you don't replace as well. Suddenly I'd look at that area and think you're a bit short, mate.
No, definitely. I mean, the biggest issue last season under Arteta was our lack of central creativity. And even though Ceballos, he doesn't really post the numbers you'd like, he does have the ability to bring others into play who then can create. So yeah, it would be quite a blow if we didn't re-sign him.
But see, thinking on Willian, mate, how do you feel about that?
It's fine. He's not on an exorbitant wage like some people are saying. It's not 150 grand a week. He's an experienced player. Chelsea wanted to keep him, so he must have been doing something right. I actually think he's quite good. Like
I'm with you, Adam. I feel like you're a little hesitant to compliment him. You're kind of. I think he's all right. You know, if he comes in and plays for you guys, if he picks you up 10, 12 goals and 10 assists or something like that, perfectly fine. You don't have to pay a transfer fee. All good.
Exactly. And it's the kind of one where I think he's a good transition player in multiple ways, actually. He's good transitioning with the ball, but also he's a good guy to sort of guide the likes of Saka,
Pepe, maybe.
Pepe, yeah, definitely. Martinelli, Nelson as well, to sort of say, look, this is what you do, because he's a consummate professional by all accounts. He's a really, really hard worker. He can run for days, and he's very, very technically accomplished as well. So yeah, I think it's fine to pretty good, I would say.
Let me tell you one thing right now, Adam. He will definitely fucking score for you against us.
I was going to say
that's a fucking certainty.
2 guaranteed goals in the North London derby. That's worth 100 grand a week.
Just when you think you're getting rid of him, we used to have spells of that. Adam will know this, where like Perez always used to score against us, and then Vieira, he used to get like 25% of his goals every season against Spurs as well. You haven't had one like that for a while. Willian's record for Chelsea against us is absurd. So
that happens the other way around. I remember Louis Saha being annoyingly good against us all the time. So yeah,
works both ways. It almost sounds like your squad is one of the most unsettled, or not anywhere close to what it will be on opening day of the season. Let alone, obviously, we know that the transfer window is like 3 or 4 weeks into the season or whatever it is. It's October, right? So it feels like there's Arsenal, one of the clubs where you could see the most amount of turnover and change and what have you. So there could be a few new names and faces that come in. Yeah, and then James joked about it before, but Aubameyang still, from an FPL point of view, is head and shoulders the best pick from your squad? Or do you disagree, Adam?
No, I think it's hard. I think you'd fire me as your correspondent if I disagreed, really. It's kind of...
Just laugh and say typical Gooner.
It's hard. I mean, there was like a brief 30 seconds where I didn't have him in and I had Pepe in instead. And then I thought, hang on, I did this last season and it went
30
really, really
seconds. 30 whole seconds you looked at the screen.
29 seconds too long, you could say.
Sometimes you need to select that team and map it out to realise how fucking bad it is. So
exactly.
I get. Let me see what it look. No. Actually, I won't do that. Actually, yeah. No, I get that.
You need to have him in your squad to just reinforce the fact that it is the wrong idea.
Let me ask a question beyond. Is he an obvious asset? I think that's well known. Is he the best game week 1 captaincy in your opinion?
I think the fact that, from my perspective, that I haven't looked beyond him would say, yeah, I think Fulham are suspect defensively. I think that the fact that they're looking to reinforce with the injured Callum Chambers, apparently, would say they're not necessarily the best at the back. I think you can make an argument for Salah against Leeds. Other than that, all the sort of other stereotypical big hitters either have slightly tough fixtures or aren't even playing. So, and especially if we're talking about the perspective, which is widely held, that Aubameyang is going to be up to game week 3, essentially, at most for a lot of people. What's the point in really having him for that first 2 if you're not going to captain him in at least one of them?
I think for me, it might be both. I'd be very surprised if I don't captain him in game week 1 as it stands now, personally. You mentioned there what a lot of people are obviously pre-thinking, this idea of moving off. And if it's in game week 3 to move off, it's probably going to be to De Bruyne or Sterling, I would have thought from that. Is that where your headspace is at with Aubameyang? Is it a case of, are you thinking, I want to dive in and dive off when the fixtures are good? Or is he someone, because his consistency is very good, you think, I just want to leave him in there?
He's the kind of person that I think leaving him in there makes, or prior to the fixtures, if you said, right, you just keep him all season, I'd say, yeah, that's fine. That makes complete sense. But then you look at that game week 3, I think it's 3 to 7 span where it's really tough. And he hasn't scored. I don't think he scored against Sheffield United, Liverpool or Man City. And that's 3, 4 or 5, I think. His record against Leicester is actually okay. But then again, against Man United, it's not necessarily as good. So I think going without him for those games, certainly the Liverpool, Sheffield United and City game, I think that's fine. I think that's perfectly fine. Harry Maguire might be locked up in a cell in Mykonos, so that could bode well for the United
Southgate
game.
doesn't think so.
No, yeah. Let's not start talking about the English squad. That could be another hour.
Yeah. And David.
I heard that Aubameyang's getting a 2-game ban for smashing up the FA Cup. He dropped it and dented it and left it. The FA are not going to be too happy about that. So banning for game week 1 and 2 makes our decision.
I'd prefer it if he was banned for game week 11 and any other. But you say, Adam, that he scored twice against City in the semi-final, right? And he scored at Old Trafford last year. He scored in the home fixture against Leicester. So that's what I mean. Is there an argument for just going, look, he's the obvious talisman. If Arsenal scoring goals, he's the most likely. We know his goal involvement's going to be sort of high 40 percentages, we think at least, really. So is it just leave him now?
I'd say leave him there if Lacazette gets sold before the end of the window.
So that would change your opinion if he goes through the middle then, maybe?
Yeah, definitely. And also he's then pretty much a dead certainty on penalties. There's a chance Pepe could get some, but yeah, and that's kind of the annoying thing, because I'm of the mind that I want to sell him in game week 3, but then if Lacazette moves on before the end of the window, suddenly I'm like, oh, okay, what do I do now? But yeah, I can definitely see why you would just want to hold him, but then again, how are you going to fit in De Bruyne or Sterling, if you've got him, are you then looking at a midfield of Fernandes / Rashford, Salah, Aubameyang, and KDB?
And Willian.
Yeah. And then Leno as well.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, block yourself. 3 Arsenal assets and Aubameyang and none. Yeah, it's interesting though, because I think most people, Adam, and I would agree with this, have probably come at peace with the idea of not worrying if Aubameyang plays left or up front. But what you say there makes me think that you would be encouraged even more if you went back through the middle.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think partly because it's the fascination, like amongst us all, really, about someone who's playing out of position, and then you have to consider, okay, who then goes to left wing and what are they providing? Because it's not just a simple like put Aubameyang to striker and then put generic left wing player. It's going to be, if we don't reinforce, it's going to be Saka there, and Saka's creative numbers are really, really good from the left wing, or potentially we might reinforce, who knows? Maybe Willian could go over there and he's a very solid creator. So you have to account for the fact that we would be adding a creative force if that were the case. Because
I understand what you're saying. You're not considering Aubameyang as one of them creative forces. You think potentially there is another viable route for him to get chances created for him. I know what you're saying. The flip of that, my opinion would be, is he's got his back to goal a lot more and actually less able to make that brilliant run that he loves inside fullback and right-sided centre half. He's less likely to be able to make that sort of run. And I think in an odd way, I think he likes to feel the game. I talk about players a lot who like to see the game. Unusually for someone with his electric pace, I feel like he is that sort of player. He does like to see the game. And I think he likes to see his own runs rather than making a hopeful run and hoping it's going to come into the channel. I think he likes to see his run and know that pass is coming. Whereas from a sanctuary, it becomes a little bit more difficult, maybe. So that might cancel it out a little bit, possibly.
Yeah, I can see that, but I think Arsenal will play quite a fluid front three. I think there'll be a lot of position changing. And in fact, we saw in the cup final, there were times when Pepe started to come quite centrally. They swapped wings a few times as well. So I think that front three will be quite fluid. It's more that I would be surprised if we went out and signed another striker, I know people have their doubts about Lacazette and their various opinions on him, but you would have to spend, say, at least 30 million to buy another striker, just because that's what strikers cost really nowadays.
Is it? Sebastian Haller. It doesn't get you anything.
Wesley, Joe Linton. I don't know where you're getting this 30 million number from, but there's so many strikers coming into the league north of 45 and 50. And Lacazette, you paid 50 for, didn't you? So to replace Lacazette with 50. It's interesting that I touted something with James a while ago where I was thinking, look, if there's every chance that Lacazette goes and that Aubameyang stays on the left and then Nketiah plays up front and he's 6 or 6.5, I don't remember off the top of my head.
It's 6.
You don't see that. You don't see that, Adam?
Nketiah, I want to be more convinced by as a player, but I just still think for his age, because he's not 17 or 18, he's not the same age as Saka. I think he's maybe 20 or 21. You'd want to see a little bit more of a more rounded game.
Yeah.
I think sometimes his touch lets him down a little bit too much, whereas I think Lacazette is quite underrated in his, if silkiness is a word. I think Lacazette's quite a classy player, but I don't really see the same with Nketiah. And I also think he needs to bulk up a little bit as well.
Get on the protein shakes a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. Eat more than sort of chicken and rice or whatever they put professional footballers on nowadays.
Yeah, interesting. Talking about the defence a little bit, just to give them a little bit of airtime. I made a genius move in FPL last season in game week 1. I started with Kieran Tierney. I was just 34 weeks too early. I really had high hopes with all the reports I'd read at what he'd done at Celtic, that he could be a bombing forward left back, and then injury plagued this season. And I wasn't annoyed to see him at 5.5 million. if he was at 5 million, I think he'd be in my team ahead of the likes of Eric Dyer, for example, who's at the same price. I'd much prefer Tierney. Can he carry on and kick on now, do you think? To the point that bombing forward fullbacks are always good FPL assets. If you look at the likes of Azpilicueta and Alonso and Trent and Robbo all through the years, if he can do that, then 5.5 might not be too much.
No, I think well, it's funny you talk about him because I was in the madness of game week 38. I almost had Tierney in as my TAA replacement. I decided to go for Serge Aurier, which worked out brilliantly.
Fucking hell, Adam.
I know. I don't know what I was thinking. It was, let's not go into it.
I know what you was thinking. Tottenham were playing Crystal Palace. That's what you was thinking.
Yeah, exactly. No, he's a great player. I really, really like him. I think there is scope for him to have maybe not an explosive FPL season, but I can see him being the kind of player that come game week 38, everyone looks back on, and he's in that team of, if you kept him throughout the season, he would have this would have been a winning team that you could have afforded from day one. His XA numbers per 90 in the Premier League are equal to Alonso. I think they were last season.
Okay.
And they're above the likes of Aurier, Mendy and Walker.
Okay.
So if you consider he played a fair amount of time at left centre back, and like you say, he was hamstrung by injury, I think this will be a really, really good season for him. I'm really excited.
Do you think his price is a fair price then at 5.5 million?
Yeah, no, I think it's a bit like Nick Pope really, being 5.5. I can completely understand why they put him there. It's a little bit annoying because I would have liked him to be cheaper, but I think it makes complete sense. He's got the history of attacking threats. I used to have to watch him in the early days in the Europa League. Some of his crosses were. He's one of the best crossers of the ball I think we've had at Arsenal for quite some time.
Wow, his ownership I'm just looking at is at 10%. So it's not small for a defender at 5.5 million. It's fairly decent ownership.
I think the problem that Tierney's got, and I think you could be looking at an asset there that will get sort of, maybe if he stays fit all season, maybe 140 to 150 FPL points for example. And if he gets that, that's really good at that value. It's absolutely, stop comparing everybody to Trent and stuff like that. That would be a really good return at that sort of value. The problem is, I think his ownership's decent because Arsenal got a good start, the first two. The problem is more to flip what we said about Aubameyang can return in those 5 games you've got between 3 and 7. You wouldn't visualise that there's going to be many clean sheets from those when you've got sort of Liverpool, Man City and Arsenal away in that period, right? Therefore, that becomes a very expensive 5.5 million asset that you don't really know what you want to do with. I think if it's just one fixture in there, you go, right, I'll suffer it. But it's going to be 3 games there out of 5 where you're probably not going to want to start him. And psychologically, because it's a defender rather than a midfielder, you're thinking, I need to get rid of this. And that's one of the things I think early on, you might see that his ownership rises before the start, but might hit the ground quite quickly coming game week 3, where people think, oh, right, Doherty's just come out of playing Man City, for example. This looks better if I've got the spare 0.5, or suddenly a team like a Spurs or Chelsea start looking solid defensively. And you can see because of the fixtures, people making that jump. So I think that's another reason why my plan, a little bit like what you're thinking, Adam, is yes, Aubameyang for 2 game weeks off, and then when the time's right, back again and be prepared to do that. Whereas I think with the other Arsenal assets, that's harder to judge. That's why also Willian and Pepe, I think they're only choices at the start, in my opinion, if you've got that preset plan, right, I'm leaving the money, I'm coming off for Rashford in game week 2 or whomever, Mahrez in game week 3, whatever your potential setup is, for example. Do you think they're worth considering at the start, Pepe and Willian?
No, not really. Yeah, like you say, it's at 8 million. I would rather have someone like Ziyech at Chelsea, even though they've got Liverpool. I think Liverpool away in the second game, is it?
Home game week 2.
Yeah, home game week 2. But Chelsea have a much I could see them still probably scoring a couple in that game. Whereas if Arsenal didn't score against Liverpool, City or Sheffield United, I don't think we could sit here and say we would be shocked. And certainly if Pepe had no involvement, I wouldn't be shocked. So yeah, I just think there are better options. I would prefer to have Aubameyang and Ziyech just purely from a coverage point of view to cover more teams.
Yeah, I looked at those as well, James, and just the Chelsea. Even if you can squeeze a 500,000 Pulisic and half a million,
works, doesn't it?
So much better.
If you think one of the things I said about Chelsea is watching Brighton, who we think will improve, is who they play first, then Liverpool, and then actually, there is scope to go Arsenal to Chelsea in game week 3. So if you think there's something there for those first 2 game weeks, I just bet you're probably going to want to jump to Manchester City that week.
Yep.
That's probably more of the problem.
Yeah.
But
Mahrez is the same price.
There's scope to do that. I mean, from that point of view, you're talking about, say, Ziyech, Willian or Pepe to Ziyech in game week 3 could work as a very nice move, actually. Or Havertz if he goes there, depending on price, etc.
I think there's also the issue then is like you're pre-planning in too many moves. If you're planning from going to Pepe, if you're essentially planning from going to Pepe, who is somewhat of an unknown FPL quantity, to Ziyech, who is a complete unknown FPL quantity, you're also wanting to get in Martial Fernandes, or a United player and a City player, you're just leaving yourself with too much to do, really.
What if you were going to wildcard in, say, game week 3 though? Then I think maybe they become interesting.
Viable. Then it's viable.
Yeah. If that's your strategy, then I think that's perfectly viable.
I think if I was going to wildcard early with that preset plan of, say, game week 3, I think I would consider strongly Tierney or Leno and possibly Willian. I would favour Willian over Pepe personally.
Yeah, me too.
I disagree. I would favour Pepe.
Well, you're the correspondent, so you tell me, sweetheart.
I think the way Pepe performed towards the end of the season, I saw like a real kind of shift in mentality, and that's kind of not been the thing with him necessarily, but he's got all the ability in the world. He's one of the most exciting dribblers we've had at Arsenal for quite some time, and I think it just started to click with him at the end of the season. And I think Arteta was really starting to get happy with the way he was performing. He was dropping deeper, coming back to get the ball and breaking like we saw him do in the French league. And so I would be more excited to have Pepe in my team than I would Willian. Does that make sense?
Noted. You know, you normally come in here and you start saying good things about Pepe, don't you?
I think I've said in every. I think I've
near enough,
every
mate.
Single time.
Can I just say from a Spurs perspective on that? When he went off in the derby, I was delighted.
Yeah,
he was giving us problems. I was really pleased when he went off. There's no doubt that the ability is there.
It's the same in the
no doubt about it.
Same in the game at our stadium. In the last 60 minutes, it was Pepe who was the driving force, running at Aaron Creswell and Masuaku. I mean, it's not much of a competition, but he was the game changer there that took the game to us and picked it up and was running into the box that made us collapse like a house of cards. So yeah, I know what you're saying, James, because I've seen it as well. It's just a lack of consistency really from him. But 8 million, you get what you pay for in FPL.
Last question, Adam. Where will you finish?
Me in FPL.
We know that you're winning it, mate. Your football team.
I think at this, it's so hard to say because obviously we need signings, and I think everyone at Arsenal is expecting more signings. As things stand with our current squad, like 6, maybe. If we get some of the signings that we were talking about earlier, 5th, I don't know. Because then you're equally talking about Chelsea signing Havertz and probably a goalkeeper. We're not going to catch them. We shouldn't catch them. Chelsea would have to have a bad season, I think, for us to catch them. And then we're relying on Ed Woodward continuing to mess things up, really, with transfers at United.
Relying on injuries at United is what we'd be relying on, actually.
Yeah.
Even if they don't buy anybody, they'll still finish above you, I'm afraid. So
I think they're one to, and if we can sort of relate this back to FPL. I'm not as hot on I have to get United assets in as soon as possible, because they look so tired in the Europa League, and they've got no squad depth at all. So if those same players continue to get flogged for 38 games, I could see them dropping off.
In game week 2, you go to Serge Aurier and I'll go to Martial and Fernandes when they're playing Crystal Palace, mate. Adam, pleasure. I say we because obviously Tottenham and Arsenal are in that group who obviously want to be in the top 4, but at the moment it kind of feels a little bit miles off because you only really see Chelsea and United getting better. Really, unfortunately, it's going to get harder for the both of us. I think Arsenal will finish 5th or 6th as it stands, but I think you've definitely got the right manager in charge there and scope if you can find consistency to finish 4th.
Yeah, ironically, I think out of if you're thinking of that sort of other than City and Liverpool, Chelsea, United, Spurs, I think we probably have the best manager at the moment in the current setup.
Cut him off.
You know where to hit, James, where it hurts when we start talking about managers, Adam. Look, we're going to have you on over the season with the Clash of the Correspondents and so much more that you give to Planet FPL with your articles and what have you. So really looking forward to it. Thank you for your time to joining us today. If you don't follow Adam, then what are you doing? But you can find him at 35who on Twitter, where he'll be spouting Arsenal-related stuff, FPL-related stuff, and Adam, cheese puns? Any cheese puns?
I try and limit them as much as I can.
Nice. Thank you very much. And thank you for all your jewels. I think dropping a bomb like Tierney's got a greater XA than Alonso might have a few people thinking about.
Same XA per 90 as Alonso. Don't misquote me.
My apologies.
You know, don't misquote a gooner. Jesus, look what happened.
James, we have so many more of these Correspondence shows coming out this week. Do you know off the top of your head who is next?
No, but I'll have a quick look. Ali, FPL Gaffer, we're talking Southampton.
Lovely. Yeah, and there's some real interesting assets at Southampton that we want to talk about, not least the main man up top, Danny Ings, and your best mate, James, Che Adams.
And Stuart Armstrong and Alex McCarthy and Carl Walker-Peters and the new boy
Salisu or whatever his name is.
Yeah, and Mr. Gineppo. And actually, they're really interesting, Southampton.
Nice. So for all you listeners out there, wherever you're listening to the podcast, make sure you hit that subscribe button or notification bell or follow or whatever else they call it on SoundCloud, Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes, and so on. Other than that, as always, stay safe. Hope you're enjoying Correspondent Week. Ciao for now.
Thanks, Adam. Cue music, please, man. Ciao.